When Valerie Dawson and her husband Logan moved to the small town of Saavedra, their arrival stirred quite a reaction. As an interracial couple, a white man and a woman of color, they stood out in a community where traditional norms prevailed. Despite living in the town's most affluent neighborhood, their presence was met with disapproving glances. The townspeople couldn't look past their differences, focusing solely on their skin color rather than their accomplishments. This underlying prejudice weighed heavily on the couple. Logan, a highly successful and influential businessman, had spent his life working tirelessly to achieve financial success. Valerie, the daughter of immigrants, came from a respected family. She had traveled to Chile on a scholarship to study medicine at the country's top university. It was there that she met Logan, and the two quickly fell in love. Together, they'd built a life filled with joy and success, founding a thriving company during their years of happiness. However, there was something that filled the young woman with insecurity. She knew nothing about her in-laws. Every time she asked her husband about his childhood, he seemed to avoid the topic. This filled Valerie with intrigue and distrust, leading her to confront her husband on more than one occasion. He would only calm her by saying that he did not have a good relationship with his family. Valerie decided to set aside her doubts and focus on building a life with Logan. Years passed, and everything seemed perfect in Valerie's life until the couple received news that shocked them both. Logan's parents had died in a terrible car accident a few days earlier, leaving their only son as the heir to their great fortune, including the huge mansion of the deceased. Upon hearing the news, Valerie was very saddened, as she had never met her in-laws. Logan, on the other hand, fell into a deep depression, suffering in silence over the death of his parents but refusing to discuss them with his wife. Seeing this, Valerie went to great lengths to cheer her husband up, but nothing seemed to lift his spirits until the day she found him in his room, crying as he looked at old photographs of himself as a child. It was then that Valerie talked to her husband and suggested moving to his childhood town, to his parents' huge mansion, thinking that it might help him move on and overcome his inner traumas. They both agreed to start fresh in a small town far from the city. They sold their apartment in the capital and arranged everything in their company to work remotely. Days later, they settled in the rural town of Saavedra, a town in Chile rich in natural resources. Unfortunately, this picturesque little town was going through a period of poverty and unemployment, leading to an increase in crime. Fortunately for them, Logan's parents' mansion was located in the wealthy part of town, in a residential complex full of luxurious homes and affluent families, where peace reigned and people seemed oblivious to the reality of the poor. The first few days after the move were blissful. The couple was happy and Logan was smiling again, excited to be back in his hometown after so long. However, there was something that bothered Valerie. She seemed to be the only person of color in the entire neighborhood. All of her neighbors were white and many had racist attitudes, making Valerie very uncomfortable. She had to endure offensive comments and looks of contempt every time she left the house. This situation made Valerie very sad, but she was willing to endure it for her husband's sake. As time went by, the couple began to adapt to their new life, but there was something they still longed for. They both wanted a child more than anything else in the world. For a whole year, they tried to conceive, but every pregnancy test they took came back negative. In the end, the young woman decided to look for alternative options, and Logan found an excellent doctor online who specialized in artificial insemination treatments. At first, Valerie was not very convinced, but after a long conversation with her husband, they both agreed to visit the doctor and undergo the expensive insemination procedure. Fortunately, everything went as planned, and a few months after starting treatment with the doctor, Valerie was finally able to get pregnant. To add to their joy, 3 months later, they found out that they were expecting a baby girl, a little girl named Angelica, who would bring Logan and Valerie's marriage back together. Sadly, this joy was short-lived. One morning, while her husband was away on a business trip, Valerie was at home alone, going through the mail when a very strange letter caught her attention. It was a letter signed by the doctor who had treated them during the artificial insemination process and was addressed to Logan. Valerie didn't want to go through her husband's correspondence, but something about that letter gave her a very bad feeling. So, she decided to read the contents of the envelope, and what she read changed her life forever. Dear Mr. Logan, I am pleased to inform you that the process of selection and alteration of the genetic material was a success. The child will not be born with any genetic disorders and will have the appearance you specified to me during our meeting: white skin, blue eyes, and straight blonde hair. This letter is to remind you of our monthly settlement payment of $30,000, plus the extra amount for risks and possible legal consequences, as I remind you that eugenics is punishable under the law of our country." Valerie couldn't believe what she had just read. She had been deceived by her own husband and an unscrupulous doctor who had played God for money. The young woman was furious, and before Lovin could return home, she threw all of his belongings onto the street. When Lovin finally arrived home, he saw a huge mess of clothes and personal items lying on the sidewalk. He immediately tried to enter the house, only to be greeted by Valerie, who was accompanied by a police officer. Before he could react, Lovin was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. He was about to receive a 14-month jail sentence for complicity in an immoral act, in addition to several $1,000,000 in restitution to Valerie. As for the doctor Lovin had hired, he pleaded guilty to medical malpractice and narrowly escaped jail time, but he will never again be able to practice medicine anywhere in the world. When detectives in the case asked Logan why he had planned such a heinous and immoral act, he only replied that he didn't want his daughter to be a brown-skinned person, as his late parents had never agreed with his relationship with Valerie solely because she was a woman of color. For that reason, Logan believed he would honor their memory by giving them the granddaughter they had always wanted, one who was white with blue eyes and blonde hair. After his statements, the authorities deemed Logan unfit to be a father and granted full custody to Valerie. As the months went by, the young mother welcomed a beautiful baby girl named Angelica into the world. Angelica resembled her mother in many ways, but their skin tones differed. However, the bond between them was far stronger than any outward differences. Following the divorce, Valerie retained half of her ex-husband's assets and continued living with her daughter in the Saavedra mansion. It didn't take long for the malicious, racist comments from her neighbors to begin. Throughout the year, the neighborhood gossip was relentless, with people making cruel remarks about Valerie and her daughter, labeling her as crazy and even accusing her of being a child thief. On several occasions, they attempted to report her to the police for kidnapping, only to be met with ridicule by the authorities, making a mockery of their own ignorance. Fortunately, Valerie was able to sell the house and move back to the capital, where she could start anew with little Angelica. This story reminds us that a mother's love knows no boundaries of race or skin color, and that God is fair, watching over and protecting all his children equally. I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Also subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss the update from our channel. Thank you.